Oh, God, it worked. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Wow, boy, lots of us. All right, well, welcome. Thank you for being here today. I am broadcasting. Apparently, I am at the Greater San Diego Association of Realtors, and my name is Kevin Burke. And there is my telephone number, and then there is my email address. So email's a little bit easier to get a hold of me. I do want to help you. If there's anything I can help you with, any questions or anything, please don't hesitate. Let me know. And thank you for being here today. I totally respect the value of your time. It is 10 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started, and we're going to run until noon. So at that point, certainly lunch. Here's some credentials, I guess, that make me qualified to teach the subject matter. I do teach continuing education for attorneys at UCSD, MCLE approved, ABA approved course on real property law. So maybe that looks good. Legal aspects of real estate. I chaired risk management for the National Association of Realtors last year for the West Group. And then I also chaired last year the risk management for the California Association of Realtors. So there you go, a little bit of something. We're going to be talking about stuff today that's going to appear to be legal. I am not a practicing attorney. I have no interest at all. They just work way too hard, much harder than we do. I'm very happy at what I'm doing. I do a lot of trial work, mostly testifying as an expert witness. And so remember, the Department of Real Estate has said that you may not call yourself an expert unless it's in a title. And so that would essentially be a court certified expert witness. I don't think of myself as an expert. I think I learn new things every day. So, and hopefully you share that same sentiment. So that's what we're here for. Hi, Don. Wow, Jody. Well, we have quite the cast today. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. So standard of care, agents' duties of inspection and disclosure, market conditions in San Diego County. Conversation today, not intended to be a substitute for the advice of your broker, nor for that of your attorney. If you are the broker, you need to be talking to yourself. You need to be learning new things every day. And if I'm your broker, then obviously you have a resource. You can get a hold of me anytime. Please consult with them as appropriate. A lot of my classes that I've been teaching, I got a really good interactions going on with the Department of Real Estate right now, and I'm going to try to get these DRE approved. Actually, they're already working on one of mine right now, which you'll see coming to a theater near you. In the meantime, this is not DRE approved. This is not for credit. And it's not retroactive. So, but this would be an example of a class I'm going to want to put in for approval. So our talk today is intended to be interactive. Please ask questions, offer input by utilizing the Q&A button. I do look forward to hearing from you. Okay. And so I'm going to try to keep us on track. I have, I'm in somebody's office right now, so hopefully we won't get interrupted, but I'm going to pull up a clock here so that I can tell what time it is. Okay, so anyway, so today's session, this one in particular, we're going to be talking about four subject matters for me that I find that most of my lawsuits that I am involved in usually relate to an issue about making a disclosure and or lack thereof. And so the TDS, of course, the real estate transfer disclosure statement, the SPQ, the seller property questionnaire, the SPQA, the seller property questionnaire addendum, and then the Avid, the agent's visual inspection disclosure. I'm probably going to tell you some stuff today that these are conversations I have usually with attorneys. And so it'll be, the word to the wise. So anyway, hopefully that will help you. This afternoon, we will be doing the disclosures, statutory or contractual. And so I've actually rewritten that class, even though I did give it a couple of weeks ago. I've rewritten that class. And so I'm hoping it'll be something that'll be very entertaining if you can make it for this afternoon's class. On Thursday, did I do this right? Thursday, I will be doing Master My Farm. I've also rewritten that class. Got some really good ideas for you, hopefully, that you will find to be beneficial in your business. And then in the afternoon, I'm going to do my award-winning How to Create a Winning Listing presentation, get every single listing you want to get, that kind of thing, because I don't know that in my career, I've turned a couple of them down. Usually I can make things work, but sometimes I find that I can be in a headbutt with an owner or something along that line. So anyway, that's kind of our calendar for this week. And so I do want to, again, thank you for joining us, TDS, SPQ, SPQA, and the Avid, and Miriam, the forums on the revised for June 23rd. There are some revisions coming on that. I can send you the list. They updated it just a couple of days ago of the new forms, the revised forms, and I will be happy to send you that list. What I'm going to be talking about today, fortunately, is really, it's going to be very detailed information, but it's also going to be general enough that it's probably going to apply to that. I think next week or the week after, I'm doing the class on the new and revised forms, and so we'll go through that. There are quite a few. They really, but a lot of it, again, as we've learned before, they modify one form and then that, changes, the same change occurs in 3 other forms. And so lots of good news there. The RPA, I don't even recall that we even touched the RPA. So good news with all of that. So, and by the way, the RPA class is the one that the DRE is reviewing right now. And it's a 5-hour class, so it's pretty extensive. So with any kind of luck, that'll come back down to us pretty quickly. And so we'll be able to start calendaring those events. So anyway, so that being said, let's talk about Easton. And so I want to do that. And then, of course, I did not pull up the Easton case. And so that's good news. We're gonna get to go in there and look at both Easton, and we're gonna look at Field really quick. Let me see if I can do a search really fast. The Easton case is a famous case. Essentially, it is the case that started the whole disclosure issue. So let's take a look. Actually, where am I in the share? Let's take a look at Easton. So this is the Easton v. Strausberger case. This case was found by the appellate court. That's never going to be good. So the Easton case was a case that came out of some activities. We're not going to go deep into this, but came out of some activities that involved a real estate agent, a brokerage in the sale of a property up north of us here. There were some slippery slopes, some problems with the soils. Everybody was aware of it, except, of course, the buyer. And so as a result, and I will send this to you if you want, just send me an email and I will send this case to you. And I'm not going to go over all of the case, but this was the case that started the whole thing with disclosures, essentially, your Avid, the requirements that are included in your Avid, things like that. So I wanted to show you that. I also wanted to show you the Field case just really fast. Let me see if I can pull that up without too much fanfare. Here's the Field case. And again, another not a good case for us. Anytime a case goes to the appellate level, that means somebody was unhappy at the lower court, the trial court level, and then it ends up getting escalated. By the time they get to the appellate level, there's a lot of money involved, and we're talking. I've had cases that were just at the base level, the trial court level, that there were millions of dollars in attorney's fees. And later on, of course, I got paid, but I wish I got millions of dollars. But it was still a good day, right? But anyway, so anytime a case goes to the appellate, this was in the fourth, and the Easton case was in the third. It doesn't matter. It's the law of the land. Once it goes to the appellate court and once the decision is published, in this case, we had a publication and on this, and we also had partial publication on the Field case. And the Field case came out of Otay Mesa. That was a case where the real estate agent, the transaction closed prior to the buyer getting a copy of the preliminary title report. They got it after closing, and of course, found out that it was the property was subject to the city of Otay Mesa. They could unload the water tank on the adjoining property and therefore flood the property. It was really more of a statute of limitations case. Unfortunately, the judge in their dicta, that's the stuff they write about their opinion, was not very kind to the real estate agent. And so as a result, it is currently the law of the land. So, all right. So, good. Okay, enough of that. Let's go back to the PowerPoint really fast. And again, that was Easton, and then we talked about Field. Both of those, the Easton case, of course, was found in 1984. The Field case much later, 1998, if I remember correctly, was the Field case. And again, it went to the appellate level, and it was decided that is now the law of the land. Okay, so what is the difference in the forms? Why are they required? In California, there is no buyer beware. I want everybody to be aware of that. There is, however, caveat vendor, which is seller beware. So, and so that's what we have in California. And yet when I do transactions on, I'm brokered on both coasts. And when I do transactions on the East Coast, they don't disclose anything. I mean, the state prepares a form of disclosure, and of course they don't have quite the litigation that we have in California. When I'm teaching in the East Coast, I always tell them I'm the advanced team. I'm the guy coming from California with all the really good news. So why are they required? The seller. Why do we require disclosures from the seller? We do that to assure that those with the most knowledge of the property share that information with the buyer. And then what about the agent? Well, the agent, to assure that the real estate professional does their due diligence in the real estate transaction. Okay. And so let's talk first. Let's talk about that real estate transfer disclosure statement. It has gone through a couple of different iterations, interestingly enough. And I frankly, I like the idea behind the form. I'm not excited about the form itself. So it's going to be called CAR form TDS. It is a statutory form, which means you must provide it as a matter of law. I put the citation in there for you, 1102.3. It is a statutory obligation. Parties may not waive a statutory right. Okay, so remember that the TDS belongs to the seller, right? It is the seller's disclosure. So you as the agent would never want to complete it on behalf of the seller. It is not the agent's disclosure, okay? The seller completes the disclosures on pages 1 and 2. With the advice and counsel of the agent. So I get this question all the time. People say, well, I sent the TDS to the seller. I told them to go ahead and fill it out. And if they have any questions, they can give me a call. I'm going to tell you that is a poor answer, and it is a very bad defense. Okay, so you need to advise and counsel your client. My recommendation, most times we're not in the same room with them, but we are online. So what I would recommend is either Google Meet or a Microsoft Teams or a Zoom or something where you can, or Glide has a good application for being able to do that, where you can go over the form and actually assist the seller in making the disclosures that they need to make. Now, do you complete the form for them? Never. Do you give them the answers? Never. And so what I always recommend to people, if you really want a safe way to do this, you want to ask a lot of questions, and I'll show you an example of some of that. So the agent signs on the sellers sign on the top of page 3. The top of page 1 is very important. Let's go into that. I rarely ever see it. I wanted to tell you something else in here. I rarely ever see a TDS filled out correctly. So I'm glad we're all here today and going to talk about that. And again, the top of page 1 is really, really important. And section 1 has changed. And so that's what I wanted to tell you about. I do have CAR's Q&A on substituted disclosures. We actually save it in our template in zip forms so that we can send it to the seller so that they can have a chance to read it before we go over the forms with them. Okay, so So let's talk about section number 1. I'm going to go ahead. Let's launch into the forms themselves. And by the way, I do have the live version of everything up and running in case somebody has a question that references a different form. But remember, again, this is and something a lot of people don't realize, but Zip Forms and Zip Tutor are available to you if you are a California Association of Realtors member. So you should be taking advantage of that. It's a great little program. So let's go ahead and take a look at the real estate transfer disclosure statement. We're going to go through it, maybe not line by line, but I assure you of this, it is going to be an action-packed 2 hours for what's left of it already. I've already blown 15 minutes. So it is, make sure, critical, you are always using the current form. So if I go back over here to my to the form itself, and I go down and I see real estate transfer disclosure statement 12 of 21, and this changed just recently. Okay, so I'm not going to trust that. I want you to be very clear about that. I'm going to open the form, and what I want you to really be looking at is going to be up here at the heading. So 1221 was the last revision. Now, remember, the transfer disclosure statement is a form that was put together by legislators. So legislator people who, as we all know, I only know Brian Jones that actually has a real estate license, a super guy out of our area here in East County. And I think a good man and certainly a good real estate agent. But he's probably the only one that understands all this. So we did make some changes back in 12 of 21. We're going to talk about that here right now. So starting off, I take a look at my TDS and I see that it starts up at the top where I need to put the physical address of the property in there. Okay. So right now I don't have an address in there because obviously I don't have, this is just used as an example, but you need to put in the physical address of the property. Again, for purposes of law, the legal description is what ultimately will constitute the transfer of sale from the seller to the buyer. But for our purposes, we are able to use the street address of the property to accomplish the objective of our contracts and of our forms. Okay, everybody good with that? So situated in the city of, whatever that is, county of, whatever that is. Thankfully, they finally put in the state of California because it always had a place for you to put in, CA, and but it wasn't completed. Well, it's only for use in California, so I don't know why that didn't happen. And then the next line, described as, and that's where you would put the situs address, the address of the property itself. Okay, remember again that the statutory requirement addresses Civil Code 1102, which relates to residential 1 to 4. So you're going to use this in a transaction where it's a single family home. Again, it can be a condo, a townhouse, a house, or a duplex, which is one owner, two, both sides of the property, one APN number, a triplex, a fourplex. That's the purpose behind the Civil Code, hypothetically to protect the innocent buyer and seller. I think some of us would understand that they're not always so innocent. Okay, so statement is a disclosure of the condition. Now, there was a recent, I hate to use the word edict, but there was a recent holding by the Department of Real Estate that said that we must put the date in here. So as of this date, so if your seller completed this form today, then today's date would go in there. If they completed the form, you don't want to change a form that somebody has already completed. But if they're going to do the date, it's always going to be the date that they actually do it. But for purposes of the real estate transaction, the Department of Real Estate has said that that they are going to consider the date that you give the TDS to the buyer to be the contract date. So, and that's the purchase agreement date. So we always want to make sure that we are thorough in completing the form. We want to make sure, the seller is thorough in completing the form, because as with anything else, you can't unring a bell. So So statement is disclosure of the condition on this date, not a warranty of any kind. It's just a disclosure, and it's not a substitute for inspections or warranties the principal may wish to obtain. I had a lawsuit not long ago where the buyer claimed that they figured that the seller's disclosure and the agent's inspection of the property were sufficient, that they didn't have to do their own investigation. So I'm really glad we have this language in here. By the way, they lost that case. I was the closing expert, as they say. I was the one that always managed to be the Trevor Hoffman, I call it, and then somebody corrected me and said he hasn't been playing for the Padres in over a decade, so that's how much I follow football, right? So anyway, okay, so you're aware of all that. Coordination with other disclosures. Now this is the part that changed, and again, if you want it, send me an email. Don't put your email address in the chat line because I'm not going to see it. But there is a form that explains the substituted disclosures. They added this language right here: no substituted disclosures for this transfer. So the TDS is considered incomplete unless the seller checks one of those three boxes. Okay. And so in most transactions, and again, I'll send you the disclosure form if you want it, but in most transactions, the seller would check the third box, and that box was not in this prior to the revision in 1221. And so it was actually added to it because we wanted the seller to have some interaction on this at the time that they completed this form. Okay, so that's the following disclosures and other disclosures required by law, including the NHD, may include airport annoyances, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so yeah, anyways, two separate civil codes. The NHD is going to be 1103.7, so different law. But we're going to see in a few minutes, we're going to see how powerful a statement that this document has on your transaction. So any questions about that part so far? I'm going to go on to the seller's information. That's always my way of getting a drink of water while I process. Okay, so we're going to go down to the second section, which we talked about, which is we just did this section 1. Section 2, rarely complete. Rarely do I ever see it completed. An incomplete TDS, and this is very important, an incomplete TDS risks defective disclosure. And if you remember from when you took the state real estate exam, there was how long does the buyer have to sue on a defective TDS? And the answer was 2 years. So for those of you upgrading to broker, please, be aware of the fact that you want to make sure your seller has completed this. Don't just pass it off like, well, they didn't complete it right. Okay. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go over to the form here. Lena, I see your hand is raised. Did you put something in the chat? I'll be able to read the chat a little bit later. It looks like you've got a pretty lengthy one in there for me. So where was I? Here we go. So again, I'm still within the zip form program in case you want me to show you anything. Seller's information. So again, it goes through all the iterations of what this is and what isn't. Seller hereby authorizes any agent representing a principal in the transaction to provide a copy of this statement. So in other words, it's not privacy protected, things like that. The following are representations made by the seller and are not representations of the agents. You see how we're constantly trying to distance ourselves from this. So the information is disclosure and not intended to be a part of the contract. And that just means that there's no warranty associated with it. Okay. So seller is or is not occupying the property. The seller has to check one of those boxes. Now I get the call on that. Well, the seller's only in it 3 months out of the year. Are they occupying it or not occupying it? I would say that they have occupied it. I would probably answer yes. But the seller has never lived in the property is not an exemption from this TDS. That's the other thing I want to send you is, what actually constitutes a TDS exempt transaction. And so I have a transaction right now where the seller is a trust. And so I think the agent has assumed that because they're a trust, that they are TDS exempt. That is not True. There are very few exceptions to the TDS requirement, the civil code requirement in California, and not all trusts are going to meet that exception. So anyway, it's going to be an interesting conversation because I'm about to have it with them, and it'll be an interesting game changer for them. And so I'm going to advise that they talk to counsel. They need to talk to an attorney about some of the conversations I'm going to have with them, broker to broker. So is the seller occupying? Is the seller not occupying it? Fine. And then we've got the items that are checked below. And so they used to read from left to right. Now I think they read down. But here's what the seller is going to do. The seller is going to check the items that are going to convey in the transaction. All right. And so you want to tell them, you say, hey, are you going to include the microwave, include the dishwasher? And the answer is yes, then check the box. Okay. But be very well aware that when you get down to the bottom, you're going to have to answer the $1 million question, which is, are there, to the best of your knowledge, any of the above that are not an operating condition? Okay. Let me make sure you're seeing my document. Yes. Okay. All right. So you would have the seller complete check the boxes on these things. Where's the exhaust fan, if any? Probably bathrooms, kitchen, garage, maybe. Where's the 220, if any? Fireplace, gas starter, roof. And again, this is a really good reason that you have the seller completing this, because you don't want to make a mistake in this. Prior to, I think it was 2001, I think, I was on the Zip Forms Advisory Committee, and I made a comment that agents were filling out the TDS on behalf of their client. And so CAR, the attorneys of CAR, just went nuts, and they said, oh, no, we can't have that. So that's one of the reasons that all these fields are blanked out, so that you are not filling those out for your client. But in fact, when you send it, you see the gray field, when you send this to the client in the electronic signature platform, it will make it so that they can fill it out as they go. And so you always want to tell your client, and again, I would have your screen up, I'd be looking at theirs or looking at yours. I prefer you be looking at what they were doing on their computer. And by the way, CAR, the Zip Forms program, has essentially Zip Consult, which is any meeting, so that you could be able to do that. You can actually see their screen and guide them through the process. Everybody okay with that? So are there, to the best of the seller's knowledge, any of the above that are not an operating condition? So if the seller's planning on taking it with them, they should not check the box. If anything that is left is not operating, yes or no. I rarely ever see this completed. I'm frequently sending TDSs back to sellers agents saying, do you want to have the seller complete the TDS properly down at the bottom of page 1? And then sometimes they get pushback and they say, hey, you know what? I just give you what they gave me. And it's like, that is not a good answer. Okay. So turn that off there. Okay. So again, anything that's not working, tell us what it is. If the answer is no, then the answer is no. But it's to your knowledge. So if you don't know if it's working or not, then the answer is no. I don't know, right? Okay. All right. So that being said, of course, my screen keeps popping up messages. So if the answer is yes, explain it. Now, you don't have to go into a whole great big treatise on the subject, but you do want to explain the yes or the yes answers. You don't have to explain the no answers. Is everybody good with that? I'm going to take a look, and I have another. Hi, Guadalupe. How do we get a TDS from a flip property? Flippers are not exempt. So a bank, for example, this is how particular it gets. An REO, the only bank that is not required to provide the TDS is the foreclosing bank. So I represented a bank that we were buying 400 homes a month across the country, and they were buying them from other banks. We used to call them tape, and they are not exempt. The foreclosing bank would have been exempt, but the others are not exempt. And so I told my buyer, I says, you're not exempt. I mean, you're going to have to, look at that. But you'll have flippers who think they are exempt. A lot of people will think, well, I never lived in the property, and that creates an exemption. That is not true. So that's not a case you want. So you need to explain to them. And again, CAR has some really good Q&As on the subject. They say you're saying say you don't have to because they're flipping the home. That is not true. They need to talk to an attorney, and you need to talk to your broker. So flippers are not exempt from the TDS. Okay, unless again it's the foreclosing bank, and then there's some issues with that. So they may not exercise dominion and control over the property. Collect, there used to be that they couldn't even collect rents. I think now California has given them an exception on that. But if you bought a property, at a minimum you should be handing over the disclosure you got when you bought it. And then you need to create your own. I don't care if you're a flipper or not. They say, they purchased the home, they cannot. What are you saying here? When I asked for the TDS that they received when they purchased the home, they don't provide it. That's not true. The disclosure that they received is not protected by Privacy Act. If anything, if I was a flipper, I'd want you to have the TDS that I got when I bought the property, because they have constructive knowledge of it. They just said they've got it. So now they have constructive knowledge of it. And so we're going to find out later anyway. I have a transaction right now where we've contacted agents that previously written offers on properties, about how did that go? So great question, Guadalupe. Yana, so is there a length of validity of disclosures? That's a really good question. So how recent does the TDS have to be? First of all, as long as you're using the current form, you don't want to be using an older form. You want to use the current form. But as long as you're using the current form and nothing has changed, then you're probably okay. But if there has been a change, then change it before the buyer comes along, create a new one, and then change it, and then give the buyer the most current version, hopefully somewhere roughly around the same time that that the transaction is starting. Now, you remember too, you have what the law refers to as a duty to amend. That means if something happens, you've given the TDS to the buyer, and now something happens in the property. So, for example, I always use the example of you gave the TDS to the buyer, and then buyer removes all of their contingencies, and then the police chase the bad guy into the house, shoot and kill him dead. Death on the property? Absolutely. Obligation to disclose? Yes. That's California Civil Code 1710. So yes, the seller must disclose the death on the property, and so we can use the addendum form, which has a box to check. In fact, I can pull that up for you if you want. The addendum has a box to check that. Let me see if I can get that. I'm sorry, I got to move things around on the screen, but let's take a look at this, because that's actually a really good question. So on my addendum form, notice right here the checkbox that says the amendment to the transfer disclosure statement. Okay, so again, be real careful, because again, you may be giving the buyer their statutory right to rescind the contract based on that amended disclosure. So just have that conversation with your seller. So how long is it good for? So now, here's the thing. If my seller completed it 6 months ago, and then I say to this, we get an offer on the property, and I contact the seller and I say, I've got that TDS from 6 months ago. Have there been any changes to it? And then the seller says, no, there haven't been any changes. Then maybe you might want to make a note of that. I would get that email from the seller that says that, and then provide that to, redact their contact information, but their email addresses and such, but provide that information to the buyer that it is not changed substantially since that time. How long are they valid? They free to fill them out again, as long as you're using the current form. I hadn't read the rest of your questions, Yana, and yet it seems like I've answered probably quite a few of them. So they get under contract, falls out, they cancel, change their mind, then relist several months later. When do they need to fill all the new ones? I would probably do a new one at the new listing. Not that complicated. I always send them a copy of the previous one that they completed, just to remind them what it was. Get updated. The disclosures. Okay, so now again, when we do a forms revision, see over here where it says all forms, I'm going to click that drop down. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to click on all. And then you see right here, form update for 12/22. So in June, roughly June 22nd, 23rd, we're scheduled for a new form update, and that will change to 6/23, right? 6/23. Okay. So yes, that's why I tell you to use templates, because we will always have the current forms in the library. If you create a template, we will update your template. We won't add new forms to it, but we will update the forms you have. So if you are in a transaction in progress, keep using what you're using in most cases. No obligation to switch to the new form, but we will let you know if you should. So again, stay tuned. I'll be doing that class here in about a week or two. So question, which would be seller be required to have to fill out all new disclosures. Again, if the forms have updated, the forms are there, and I'm assuming you don't have a transaction in progress, then the forms are there to protect you. Forms are created, changed again, and based on litigation, legislation. The reason we changed them in June is because on July 1st, the laws will change. And likewise, we change them again at the end of December because on January 1st, the laws will change. So January 1 and July 1 are trigger dates for us, and that's why we do that. So Yana, thank you for asking your question. Karen, so can a property manager fill out the TDS on behalf? No, statutory form. Who hasn't lived in the home? No. So property managers do not want to be filling out forms for owners. The TDS is not used necessarily in a rental situation for a property manager, but if a property manager is going to be selling the property, they're switching hats. They send the forms just like we do normally. Okay, so good question, Karen. Thank you. Lena, your email box is full. Yes, I know. I'm trying to get my guy to fix it. I used to get about 1,600 emails a day, but I stopped teaching in the colleges, and so that was really a good thing. So let's go ahead back here. Thank you for bringing that to my attention there, Lena. So let me go back to my transfer disclosure statement again, because we got to get moving along here. Here it is. Okay, I just can't reach it from this part. All right, there we go. Back to my TDS. Here it is. Okay, good. All right, so oh no, what? So anyway, let's go down to where we were. That was page 1. Page 2 now is going to be still the seller filling this part out, right? So at the top of page 2, are you, the seller, aware? The operative word is aware. And so people say, well, what if they don't know? Well, then the answer is no, they don't know. Okay, there is no I don't know on the form. And I remember when we first started using the form and people were trying to kind of fit in I don't know next to things. Well, that's not, if you don't know, then the answer is no. But again, the seller may have to defend that. If it turns out later on that they did know and they lied about it, then now we have fraud issues and stuff like that. So are you, the seller, aware of any significant defects or malfunctions in any of the following? So remember in the previous page, we gave all the items that were going to be included in the transfer, and then we asked the question. Now we ask the question first, are any of the following items defective? Anything we've got a problem with: walls, ceiling, floors, insulation, roof, windows, whatever. So like windows, the gas leak, there's a gas leak in the dual pane windows, and so it's foggy, that would be a good time to check windows and then put it down, if it's a yes answer, then explain it, and hopefully you have enough room. If you don't have enough room, use the amendment. Okay, remember the addendum form? All right. Slabs. I bought property with cracked slabs before, so cracked slabs, usually cause everybody to start shaking, but it's like, no, a lot of times they're not a big deal. If any of the above is checked, please explain it. Okay. So, something else I wanted to point out, and that is that, we've got smoke detector, water heater, statements of compliance and stuff, but a lot of that stuff you don't need if you're using the current TDS. And so if you read this paragraph, the carbon monoxide is CO1, right? Dioxide would be CO2. All these things may not be in compliance with the safety standards, and then it goes through the whole health and safety code or the pool safety standards. So this is why Windows security bars is covered. I did the disclosure class Thursday, and we went through Windows security bars and things like that. Let me see, go to the gist of it. Requires all single-family residences built on or before 1994, right, to be equipped with water-conserving plumbing fixtures after after January 1 of 17. So so a single family home built on or before 94 that is altered or improved is required to be equipped with these things anyway. So that's why we use the WCMD form to satisfy that. But this is going to take the place of the carbon monoxide form. So are you the seller? Paragraph number C now. Are you the seller? Hang on a second. I got a question in here. Oh gosh, that's way too big. Let me see here. Question. No, okay, I covered it already. Thank you, Lena. I know it's been that way for about 24 hours, which is really kind of causing me a problem, but I'm going to try to get that fixed when I get off this call, find out what's going on with my guy. So are you, the seller, aware of any of the, this is paragraph number C on page 2. I traditionally get this form back and the seller has checked no all the way down the page. It's the same kind of thing they did when they did it manually. When they would take your pen, they would just go right all the way down. My house is fine. I don't know nothing, right? And so it's like it is never the right answer. We added the word mold. Because everybody was checking no. So we added the word mold, and I'm not aware of a property that doesn't have some mold in it, whether it's really obvious mold. But remember, again, you are not qualified. I have a graduate certificate in hazardous materials, so I know the difference between mold and mildew. I don't tell people that, but I'm never going to make that statement. So I ask you, do you know the difference between mold and mildew? And the answer is you probably don't, or you don't want to answer it because you're not qualified to answer it, but there's probably mold everywhere. And I talk to my sellers about this. I talk to my attorneys about this, and they laugh because I have the seller say yes. And then down below here, where they explain the yes answers, they just put mold is everywhere as part of the life process, stuff like that. I'm not trying to be flippant about this, but it's kind of a tough question to answer, okay? Features of the common share of the property shared in common with adjoining landowners. Again, walls. Whose wall is it? I don't know. Whose fence? Maybe a driveway. What are those items that may be shared with others? Any encroachments or easements? I'm not aware of a property that doesn't have an easement on it. So the seller may not know that there are easements on their property, but if they're not aware, the answer is no. So room additions made without necessary permits, and sometimes that happens. But then there's also items, room additions made that are not in compliance with the building code. Two completely different things. If they didn't have permits issued, that's one issue, but they could have built it better than the code would have required. So, we don't know the answer to that, but so the answer is yes or no. Fill, compacted or otherwise, had a really good lawsuit on that where the agent said that, there was a minor settling crack. And then 2 weeks after closing, the whole room broke off because part of the house was on cut and then the other part was on fill. Okay. All right. So you make sure you're talking to the seller about these things. Any settling from any cause, flooding or drainage problems, major damage to the property from what? Fire, earthquake, flood, or landslide. So remember, 2 earthquake, 2 fire, 2 flood are the 3 of my natural hazard disclosure statements that are going to be required. Any zoning violations, non-conforming use, it was conforming at one point, but it is no longer. The law changed, but they were allowed to grandfather back in, so to speak, those things that they could do before. Neighborhood noise problems. I don't know a place that doesn't have them. My house is up on the bluff, oceanfront. I got helicopters coming through my, not coming through my window, but going past my window. I got train, those are things I've gotten very used to over the years. The problem is that I need to, remember those things when I go make my disclosure. I remember my first night in the house, the first train that went by, I thought the place was going to go off the edge of the bluff. So be aware, you need to talk to sellers about those kind of things. CC&Rs and other deed restrictions. I think all properties have CC&Rs, right? Or a deed restriction. My property doesn't have a homeowners association. Don't confuse the two, but I can't build a 16-story high rise there. It's deed restricted. So the answer is probably going to be yes there. Homeowners association, yes or no. Any common area, yes or no. Any notices of abatement, stop doing this. like, or get your weeds trimmed. Otherwise, we're going to come back and give you a citation. That's the second part of that. So if they have it, they know they have it. Okay. It's usually posted. It's usually the fire department, somebody like that. And then paragraph number 16, any lawsuits by or against the seller threatening the property. And again, that was a paragraph we added in 21. So again, yes or no. If there's a yes answer, we're going to fill it out down here at the bottom of page 2, and then we can attach additional sheets. I would recommend the addendum for that. And then finally, my other two big ones. So the seller certifies that the property will be in compliance with health and safety code operable smoke detectors. Remember what I said before, we don't need smoke detector form if we're using the current current TDS. And then seller certifies that the property will be in compliance, having water heater braced, anchored, or strapped in place. And so we just figured, why don't we just add those to the transfer disclosure statement? And again, this had to go through legislative approval. They went a long time without being changed, but I really like what they've done to it. Okay, so is everybody good with that? Okay, then I get down to page 3, and I'm going to pop back over to my PowerPoint really fast. So paragraph number 3, I'm sorry, the seller signs the top of page 3. We tried everything we could to keep them on only up to page 2, but we just couldn't do it. The font was too small anyway. So they're going to sign the top of the page, and then we're going to get into the agent's visual inspection disclosure. So the first thing that happens is that the seller's agent must complete their Avid. The TDS is not considered complete until the seller's agent's Avid is given to the buyer. All right. Okay. So that's a requirement. All right. The buyer's agent will come back to that one here in a second. Let's take a look at the form real fast. So up here, I've got the seller signing the form, and then here I have my agent's inspection disclosure. And again, this language, based on the above inquiry, the condition of property, based on a reasonably competent and diligent visual inspection of the accessible areas of the property. Okay, and so that's right out of Strasbourg, right out of the Easton case. Now, notice that it is a inspection; it is not an investigation. So the seller's duty is to disclose what they knew or should have known. The buyer's duty is to investigate the property. The agent's duty is much smaller. It's just a duty to inspect. Okay, and again, reasonably competent, diligent visual inspection of the property. I'd probably use all the senses, but this is what the statute says. Okay, so what box do you check? In our office, we require the first box. We require our agent to do the Avid. I don't know what a property looks like where you check, where the seller checks, or you check. I didn't see anything wrong with it. Pete Selecki, our general counsel for the San Diego Association, made a comment in a class. I had him speaking in one of my classes once, and he says, if you don't have anything to disclose, I'm going to go out there to the property with you. And he's even said his property, when he sells his property, it's got 6 pages of disclosures. He says, I disclose crickets, grasshoppers, poltergeists. He says, I make stuff up because they can't sue me over what I told them. And so I wouldn't, again, I'm quoting, unfortunately, but he's not making things up. Be truthful, put it all in there. He was just using it for emphasis. So, or in the old days, we just had this box, agent notes the following items. I would use the Avid, and here's why. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But Veronica Kilpatrick, who's the district manager, every time she talks, I listen. And she said, it's the only thing we ask you to do. You need to be able to defend the fact that you actually visited the property and you do the Avid. Okay, so I like that advice. It's really good. We require it in all of our transactions, so it just is what it is. The seller's agent's name, company name goes in here. The licensee who signs it under here. And then I get to my buyer's agent side. And again, remember that the TDS is not complete until the seller's agent's Avid is given to the buyer, but the same is not true for the buyer's agent. So unfortunately, I see this not happening very quickly in a transaction. I tell Linda's buyer's agents that they really need to do that Avid really right quick after the transaction comes together. And clearly we get all of the disclosures signed prior to or at the time of the listing. And the reason behind that is because when we get an offer, we send over all the statutory disclosures with the counteroffer, the buyer loses their 3-day right to rescind the transaction. And so rescission is a very powerful word at law. We'll talk about a little bit about that later. One of the big mistakes, I think they've corrected it, but one of the big mistakes on this form on the bottom of page 3, and it's only a 3-page form, was that the electronic signature platforms were automatically stamping it, the seller's signatures and then the seller's agent's signatures. And of course, that's if you're having your seller sign this, at the time of the listing, and you're having them sign it down here, it says we acknowledge receipt of a copy of this statement, which includes the buyer's agent's information in here. And so if they're signing it prior to the offer, prior to the buyer's agent completing it, then you're going to have them sign it again. But we do see people that do that. I would recommend that and again, I think they fixed it, but if not, untag it, take those tags off the side, wait until the buyer's agent fills in their information, and then you can run around getting everybody else's signature on here, okay? Then down at the bottom of the page, I just referenced it a second ago, 1102.3 provides the buyer a right to rescind. Rescind, a very powerful word of law. Put the parties back in the position that they were in prior to the contract, which means the deposits go back, everything is, there's no fight with a statutory right? But there can be a fight for a contractual right, but this is statutory. Okay, so it says in here, for at least 3 days after delivery of this disclosure, if the delivery occurs after the signing of an offer to purchase. So obviously, if this was given to them prior to the offer to purchase, they don't have a rescission right associated with that. Okay. All right. So again, need to talk to an attorney, need to talk to counsel, all that kind of stuff. All right. Everybody good so far? That's the biggest one that we're going to go through. We'll go into some of the others here now in a second, but they're not quite as complex. So paragraph 5, parties and agents sign after all of the above are complete, what I just said a second ago, acknowledging receipt of the completed form. Okay. And so then I said, let's take a look. Well, we've already done that. We've gone through the entire form. Okay. So let's move on now. Any questions? I'll give you a break for a second. Any questions? No. Okay. Seeing none. Let's talk about the SPQ. And again, it is not statutory. It is contractual. It is in the contract. And we argued for a long time when we first came out with the SPQ form about whether or not we would just include it in the contract or whether we would have a checkbox. And then again, your question earlier about the flippers don't want to fill out the SPQ, but the contract requires it. So again, it's on them if they decide that they don't want to honor the contract. You could have some breach issues, things like that. But it's a very important thing. Okay, so it is a contractual obligation for sure. It is in the contract. It's in the purchase agreement. Okay, it is intended. Here's what the SPQ is intended to do. It decodes the items that the TDS missed. Okay, so remember what I said earlier? There are a bunch of statutory disclosures that are not included in the TDS. So the SPQ is intended to do that, intended to clear that up. It is also the standard of practice in California. And again, we're going to talk, so you always have the TDS, you always have the SPQ after it, and then we'll talk later on about the SPQA and all of those things. So are you, the seller, aware of? So let's take a look at that. I'm going to go ahead and launch over into that form. So I'm going to go over here to my seller property questionnaire. There it is. And so here it is. And so this is going to be a lengthy document, but you're going to see from the very beginning, it's not a substitute for the TDS. That's very important. It is to append the TDS. Okay, it provides additional information. This form actually came from the San Diego Association Sellers Additional Disclosure, which was a form that was used that SDAR's Risk Management Committee created, and CAR liked it so much that they decided to create their statewide version of it. Some would argue they copied it, but really I think they did a pretty good job of creating a statewide form. And then of course, as a result of that, they missed a bunch of stuff that was in San Diego. So that's why we came back and created a seller property questionnaire addendum. Okay. All right. So it is used by the seller to provide additional information when the TDS is required. All right. If the seller is exempt from completing a TDS, then they need to complete the CAR form ESD. Everybody good with that? Okay. So the ESD is the exempt seller's disclosure. All right, or may use the form instead. Now, I said earlier that that there are very limited exceptions. There are very few that are exempt from a TDS, but even though they're exempt from using the form, they may have to still make the disclosure. They just don't have to use the form. So if the bank, for example, knows that somebody died on the property, then they would have an obligation to disclose the death, right? Even though they're TDS exempt, they don't have to use the TDS form, but they do still have to make the disclosure, okay? Again, newer should have known. And the agent, of course, is never exempt. I see many an agent who thinks they're exempt because the seller's exempt. That's not true. Okay, so disclosure information advisory, you really should be having your seller sign that prior to filling out these forms. I like the form. I just had one signed by a seller that we have. And then the seller makes the following disclosures. This would be the address that we talked about this earlier, about what that's going to look like. It'll auto-populate if you've populated it on the TDS or on the rest of the form, okay? So again, based on the time that it is, I know that we're going to I'm not going to go line by line, but I'm going to give you a really good representative sampling of what this is all about. So the limitations here are not limitations, not representations of the agent. Again, not a warranty of any kind. So a copy of the language from the TDS. And then to protect us, the broker and any real estate licensee or other person working with or through the broker has not verified information provided by the seller. Now, where I see us make mistakes is where we do in fact corroborate, or we do in fact investigate, and we don't want to be doing that because that's way beyond our standard of care. Okay. All right. So real estate broker, and this is this language was added to the SPQ. Real estate broker is qualified to advise on real estate transactions. If the seller or the buyer desires legal advice, they should consult an attorney. And CAR has coined in the last 6 to 9 months now the term QCREA, which is the Qualified California Real Estate Attorney. I had a call. I get calls all the time. Well, my attorney said, and I go, wow, I don't know. I teach attorneys this stuff. Where's your attorney? Oh, they're in Illinois. And I go, oh, did they know that you were asking them to give advice on a California transaction? Well, no, they didn't. Okay, well, because they could get disbarred for that. So make sure your client is using a qualified California, a real estate specific attorney licensed in the state of California. Okay. All right. So again, note to seller, here's the purpose of the form. We have an explanation of that in there. Note to the buyer, here's the purpose of the form for their purposes. And then we talk about seller's awareness. Once again, I think they do a better job of explaining it, but the legislative body is trying to keep that TDS at 3 pages. And so that's why this is, I think, certainly it appends that form. As I said earlier, a yes answer is appropriate no matter how long ago the item being asked about happened or was documented, unless otherwise specified. And so anytime you have a yes answer, then you need to fill in the blank. And I'm frequently finding myself sending these back because the sellers will say yes to something and not fill in the blank. So as you can see, they have the ability to check the box, but they also have the ability to type in their explanation of what's going on. Once they've completed and signed it and closed it, now the only way you can't unless sending you a whole brand new one is going to be to have them send them a text field within the program and then have them change it and initial it. Okay, so all right, so let's go a little quicker here. So documents, here's a conversation about the documents and inspections and things like that. Remember that the appraisal is not considered a report, so it is not necessary to give it to the seller unless, of course, the buyer is using that appraisal to get out of the transaction. And also a note to the seller, if the seller has knowledge that they got a physical inspection from a buyer and that buyer does not consummate the sale, then they probably would be in their best interest to give that disclosure to the subsequent buyer. I'm just saying that for, kind of keep yourself out of jail thing. And then again, yes answers, you got to explain them. Notice big print right here. Are you, seller, aware of, yes or no? And then we have our statutorily or contractually required or related And so I said this earlier to you that the TDS is I think hopefully deficient. But notice the very first thing within the last 3 years, the death of an occupant of the property upon the property. Now remember, that is on the property. That's not in the house, not in bedroom number 2, anywhere on the 4 corners, anywhere on the property somebody has died within the last 3 years. You must make that disclosure. And again, the manner of death may be material to the buyer and should be disclosed, except for death by HIV or AIDS are statutorily exempt. So what's the answer? The answer is I don't have to tell you, and now you know that they died of HIV or AIDS. I get it. And then methamphetamine contamination, we have an MCN form, but if the seller says, yes, I've got a notice, then you need to give a copy of that notice. You need to give a copy of the form to the buyer, letting them know why, because that stuff still goes boom. Release of an illegal controlled substance on or beneath the property, meth would qualify for that as well. Whether the property is located in or adjacent to an industrial zone. And again, your natural hazard disclosure would probably tell you that. Nuisance created by an industrial zone, whether the property is located within a mile of a federal or state ordinance location. So like Tierra Santa or Coronado, those kinds of things. Once used for military training purposes that may contain potentially explosive munitions. We find stuff in Tierra Santa all the time. All right. Okay. Whether the property is a condominium or located in a PUD or other common interest subdivision, yes or no. And again, if you saw my class last week, I quoted each of the statutes for these questions. Insurance claims affecting the property within the past 5 years. So I've had sellers not be completely truthful about these things, but the buyer you should be having your buyer at the time of contract talk to their insurance company and have the insurance company will run the clue report, because the insurance company wants to protect their own interest in it, obviously. So they'll pull up the clue report to see if there were any claims on the property in the past 5 years. Everybody good with that? That's page 1 of 4. Any other questions on that? Seeing none, we're going to go into, I'm sorry, there were still a couple items. Matters affecting title of the property, plumbing fixtures of the property that are non-compliant, material, and again, here's my civil code, right? So it's a big word. Material facts or defects affecting the property not otherwise disclosed to the buyer, okay? All right. Repairs and alterations. And again, we've talked about this briefly before. Did you repair anything? Was it done in a workmanlike manner? Things like that, because those are questions that the purchase agreement asks. Structural systems and appliances, disaster relief insurance or other civil settlements, water related and mold issues. You see how we're like unpeeling the onion on that TDS. Pets, animals, and pests. And so, I'm looking at this knowing that we're going to be going to the SPQA next. And so some of these things we think in San Diego, we think that the CAR form is perfectly adequate. And so we'll see pets, animals, and pests. They'll say, no, we don't have to do anything with that because it's already done. So boundaries, access, and property use by others. I always say that property boundaries make fences make good property boundaries, but they don't make good neighbors. And so, I did that backwards. Fences make good neighbors, but they don't make good property boundaries. And I have a number of lawsuits where the fence line was within, encroaching on the property. And so, and of course, that's something that can be fixed, but then the buyer relies on that and it can make it worse. Okay. So boundary access and property used by others, landscaping, pool and spa, some of the good questions in there. Condominiums, common interest, again, from before. Title, ownership, liens, and legal claims. Again, you can go through, read all these things. But these are the things you need to go line by line with the seller. And I know people tell me, oh, it's a lot of work. Oh, it takes a long time. Listen, you are endearing yourself to your client by helping them fill out the form. All right. And so, because they don't know. you're doing real estate transactions every day, I hope, right? But they're doing them once every 3 to 5 years, maybe 7, or maybe longer. So they appreciate the help. You need to be going over. I would sit down with them and just read it line by line. If you can't sit down with it, once again, get them on a video call. Okay. Neighbors, neighborhood, again, my noises, things like that. The Del Mar Fair. So for where I live, the Del Mar Fair clearly affects the interactions in the city of Del Mar. It brings what we call carnies, things like that. The crime rate goes way up during the fair, being in town, and so I'm not sure, I haven't checked recently, but I think we're still having it there. But, you need to be telling people about that. You need to be telling people about the train noise. You need to be telling them about the freeway noise, right? That kind of thing. Pretend like your buyer's moving from Connecticut and they don't have any knowledge of the property other than, what you tell them. Okay. So what the seller tells them. All right. Then I've got my governmental issues in there, ongoing or contemplated eminent domain condemnation, things like that. So they're at some point, they're going to get their act together, and they're going to do something about the trains that are on the bluff, and that's going to be disruptive for a lot of people. But it's either that or there are failures there all the time. We just had one last year that was pretty significant. So those are things you need to be telling people about. Okay, and then I have 18 is other, any occupant of the property smoking or vaping on the property, whether past or present. So again, these things are just intended to unwind the TDS and make it a little bit easier for the buyer, easier for the seller, because the seller otherwise are going to ask you a lot of questions on the TDS that could have been answered in here. And then again, if I have an addendum, I'm going to check that box. Seller represents the seller has provided the answers and if any, explanations and comments on the form and any attached addenda, true and correct to the best of their knowledge as of the date they sign it. Same rule applies that applies to the TDS. If something changes, you need to let them know in writing, not the telephone call. Okay. And then the seller acknowledges that their obligation to requested by the form is independent from any duty of disclosure the licensee may have. In other words, those are two completely separate things. Remember, seller's duty is to disclose what they knew or should have known. The agent's duty is to inspect, not investigate. Let's see. Yeah, and I like the fact that, and we say things all the time. You have the disclosure created in writing to protect you, and then we say things that are inconsistent with the disclosure. So this is a really good reason to be reading these forms, folks. You really need to read the form. You need to be really careful. When I show you the Avid on page 1, I'll show you where a lot of my trial work has been at the bottom of page 1 on the Avid. Okay, so please do not make comments inconsistent with the document. All right. So remember, it's the seller's disclosure. Now, if the seller's not going to disclose something, your job is to explain to the seller why they should disclose it, right? For their own protection. Picking on Pete again here, he said, the seller says, I don't want to disclose that. And the question is, why not? Well, because if I tell them about that, they won't buy the house. And Pete says, well, you probably don't want that buyer, because it's better that they get told in the beginning in writing and acknowledge it than not to tell them at all. And then you've got the little old lady with the cookies who comes by and says, hey, welcome, new neighbor. How are you? I live next door. Here, have a cookie. Oh, by the way, did the seller tell you about the $18,000 worth of repair work that they had to do because the sprinklers were hitting the side of the house? And of course not, no, insurance claim, nothing. None of that was ever disclosed. So, it's prudent on a good seller's agent to sit with the seller and go through this form and make sure that the seller is aware of their duty contractually in this case here. Okay. All right. Questions about that? We are I'm not trying to take up your entire 2 hours, but it looks like we're going to get close. So let's talk about the seller property questionnaire addendum. It is the SDA of our form Spqa. It could be a contractual obligation if you put it in the contract. So we put the SDA, we have in our template, it says SDAR forms APA, LAD, and SPQA are included in the transaction, because we want to include those forms and we want people to be aware of them. So could be a contractual obligation. If you don't put it in the contract, contract and you get pushback later on, they don't want to provide it, you need to put it in the contract. Okay. All right. It is intended to decode those items that the TDS and the SPQ missed. So that's why it's not as intense, but it's kind of like closing the loop on things, the nail in the coffin, whatever term you want to use. But it is the standard of practice in San Diego County. So remember, the SPQ is the standard of practice in California. The SPQA is the standard of practice in San Diego. I had an attorney call me, and he said, he called me up and he said, I'm representing a broker. I'm defending a broker. And in the course of the conversation, he says, they did not provide the SPQA. Again, in San Diego. And so before I had a chance to really respond, he says, I know what you're going to say. It's the standard of practice and the standard of care in San Diego County. And I go, yeah, what do you want? I mean, I don't know. It is. And so needless to say, the conversation did not go well because it was a form they should have done. It doesn't mean it's a losing case. It just means they should have provided the form. And I guess the attorney was looking to have me say that it wasn't required. And that was clearly not going to be the case. Okay. All right. Oh, hi, Jane. Let me see here. For section 6F, it says whether the property is located within 1 mile of a former federal or state ordinance location, right? In general area once used, right? Should ordinance be changed to ordinance? That's a really good question. So ordinance, ORDNANCE, is stuff that goes boom. Ordinance, ORDINANCE, is a rule or a law or a regulation put together by the locality. Good question. I checked the meaning and it says an ordinance is a municipal or county law, correct? Ordnance is a mass noun referring to military materials. That's correct. Yeah. Okay. So I hadn't read the rest of your question, but you actually answered it yourself. You're absolutely right. So ordinance is a rule or a law. Ordinance with no I in it is stuff that goes boom. That's the way I always describe it, and hopefully that helps. Okay. Good question. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay, so let's take a look at our SPQA. I'm going to show you the differences between the SPQA and the SPQ. Again, both of them with the intent to fix the what's missing in the TDS. Okay, so here's my SPQA, and notice it is created by the Greater San Diego Association of Realtors and intended primarily for use in the San Diego area. So San Diego County area. So Temecula, South Riverside County, maybe not, but I think it asks some really good questions. You might even want to provide it to the seller and ask them, is any of this stuff going to apply to you? It's a good question created by the San Diego Association of Realtors. And so your chances are pretty good. Your broker is a member of the San Diego Association of Realtors. And so this form would be available to you for free in the platform. So, okay. So let's go into that. We got the seller's name, we've got the property address, we got the date. And so again, so something else, it is not covered by the CAR's user protection agreement because they didn't create the form, right? They ended up, like I said, they ended up creating the SPQ, which would have been would be covered by the user protection agreement, again, assuming you use the current form. So this form, the SPQA, is intended to be used with the SPQ. And so I said this to you earlier, there are 3 forms. You've got the TDS, you've got the SPQ, you've got the SPQA. Okay, so all 3 of them, I think, in a transaction in San Diego County. TDS in California, always at a minimum. The SPQ, always at a minimum. And then San Diego County also use the SPQA, but never skip a form. So don't do the TDS, but do the SPQ and the SPQA. No, you're not going to do that. You always have to have the TDS, and then you always have to have the SPQ, and then strongly advise that you have the SPQA as well in San Diego County. Okay, so then we added to this, the paragraphs below are numbered to assist you in comparing them to the SPQ. Okay. So again, you should consult a real estate attorney in California. If you have questions about any of this stuff, broker cannot answer questions for you, clearly, not fill out the blank, or advise you on the legal sufficiency of any answers or disclosures that you provide. So seller awareness, we just added to the description of that. We said check the appropriate response for each question. For each yes, give an explanation on the line below. If there's insufficient space, use the addendum. Okay. All right. And so that was SPQ paragraph 5, SPQ paragraph 6, statutorily or contractually required or related. Nothing to say about that. It was done quite well in the SPQ. SPQ paragraph number 7. We just wanted to tell you, attach a copy if available of any document such as a receipt, invoice, or report. And so I'm sure California will append their document when they've seen this one enough times that they'll probably want to fix what they've got going on up there. Yes or no, I don't know. Seller property questionnaire question number 8, structural systems and appliances. So we obviously got a little bit deeper into the topic, deeper into the subject matter on that. Are you aware of any roof leak during your ownership, where if the roof has been repaired, replaced, resurfaced? If yes, when, who did it? Remember, there's no privy of contract between the contractor that did the work. One of the reasons I prefer to have buyers get credits rather than sellers doing work is that there's no privy of contract between the person that did the work. The privy of contracts between the seller and the person that did the work if the seller paid for it. But if the buyer is just getting a copy of a report, they may not have any legal standing to sue the person that did the work or get their insurance to cover anything as well. Okay, so was there a guarantee or warranty? These are all really good questions, and this is it's interesting. This is a form that we've asked for in a transaction that we're doing right now, and I'm realizing that this is all right on point. This stuff that we're not being told. Okay, provide a copy. Are you aware, gutters and downspouts? Are you aware of holes or rust? Is the drainage water directed away from the structure? And then some other things. And again, this is page 1 of 6. So my SPQ was 4 pages. This is 6 pages. Now you're sitting there going, "Oh, then there's the TDS with 3 pages. I mean, that's 13 pages." And it's like, yeah, and I don't think it's enough, but okay, I get it. I have had a lawsuit where the seller completed the SPQ and missed a box. You want to make sure all the boxes are checked, yes or no, but the seller missed a box. That was caught within a week, was sent back to the seller. The seller completed it and explained it. So now they had a completed SPQ. And then less than 3 years later, because you got to file your lawsuit within 3 years, but within less than 3 years, the buyer files a lawsuit against the seller for essentially deception. And so their case was that the seller should have told them more. I remember it because I went to the hearing on it as a witness, and I explained to the judge, because the judge says, "What are you doing here?" And I says, "Well, the seller disclosed what they knew. They hadn't lived in the property for about 5 years, so they really didn't, have their eyes on to anything. What they did do is they gave the buyer the minutes of the board meetings. They gave the buyer the CC&Rs and all that stuff. And the minutes of the board meetings very clearly outlined the fact that there was construction going on in the complex, and that was the issue at hand in this case. And so, as I said to the judge, I said the seller can only disclose what they knew or should have known. And when I use those terms, the seller just the judge just kind of lit up, right? Because those are legally charged words. And so obviously I had a pretty good idea what I was talking about. But needless to say, the seller won the case. They had disclosed everything that they knew. They can't disclose stuff they don't know. And this is a really important point that I make towards not having sellers do a pre-listing investigation of the property. I don't think, why are we raising the bar for the seller? Why are we having the agent order an inspection, by a contractor, when they take a listing? I don't understand the concept. I have a real hard time with it. I know some people agree with it. CAR attorneys are kind of like, they put it in the listing agreement, the authority for the seller to give the seller's agent authority to investigate the property or commission an investigation of the property. And the only reason we did that was because when we got rid of the WPA form back in 2012, San Francisco Association, was fighting to keep that language in there, and so to keep San Francisco happy, we added that language to the listing agreement. But again, I would be against my advice as a broker to my agents not to have the seller investigate their own property. That's the buyer's obligation to do that. Okay, here question. Hi, Yana. Can we, I think you mean ask the buyer, can we, as the buyer, require the seller to provide the SPQA as part of the disclosures? And the answer is yes. The buyer can require it by putting it in the purchase agreement. So if you'll take a look at paragraph number 4 of the RPA, you will see paragraph number 4B, other addenda and advisories. We're going to add in there SDAR forms, APA, LAD, and SPQA are included in this transaction because we want the seller to give us a completed SPQA, and that's the way we're going to do it. Okay. All right. So that is a good question. That is page 1. And then I get down into page 2. And by the way, this is a subject, I love this stuff. I mean, this is the really cool stuff that sometimes we take for granted, but it is so incredibly important, and it is so important to your career that this be done properly. So I love this topic. So leased or financed items and systems, we came out at the state level with leased or liened items, years ago, and it really just served to confuse people. So now we're going to ask about any leased or financed items and systems, type of system and or of item and or system. If you answer yes to any of these, you got to complete it. If no, then move on to the next section. So water softeners, that's a good example. Alarm systems, a good example. Solar panels, always a problem, right? Average lawsuit is $58,000 because, half the time, we forget to ask the seller if it's paid off or whatever. And even if they say it's paid off, folks, that doesn't mean that the installer doesn't still have a right to the solar panels. So you got to really make sure the seller provides all that stuff. I'm telling you, it's a big deal. Propane, things like that. Okay. Question. Hi, Patty. Would a solar PPA be a yes under D2 other obligations? If there is one, yes. I'm assuming you're not asking me about the solar form, right? We do have a form for solar, the SOLAR. But if there's a purchase agreement or something else in place that there's an obligation, a lot of times these companies, you have to qualify. The buyer has to qualify again to get the right to the panel, or the installers, the way they write these things, they can have, they can come take their stuff. I did a transaction 2 years ago with one of Linda's agents, who happens to be a practicing attorney and an agent within our company. We have a couple of attorneys in our office, in our company, in Linda's company. I don't have a company. I gave it to Linda. So anyway, but this was they were the buyer in the transaction. And the sellers wrote a counteroffer that said solar does not convey. At the end of the transaction, the seller had thought that because they had talked to the solar company that they were purchasing it from, they were still making payments, but they wanted to move it to their house across the street. And so they contacted the solar company that sold it to them, to whom they were still making payments. And the company said, "Oh yeah, we can transfer it for you, not a problem." What they didn't ask the question was, and this is why I say you need to be talking to counsel, but they didn't ask the question when, and the answer was a year from now. We're busy, we won't be able to get to it for a year. And so the buyer says, "I'm closing in 3 weeks," and per contract. And you know what ended up happening? And they didn't want the solar power system at all, but they didn't want the roof getting torn up either. So they ended up owning it. The seller had to cut a check to the solar power company for $52,000 to pay off the solar power. So folks, this is, if you're a broker, you're a salesperson, you need to be really, really good about making sure you get all that information. Okay. And so needless to say, the seller had to pay it off because the buyer wanted it off the property or leave it, but leave it without a contract. And so it was a really great transaction, I thought. But the other agent, I've known that other agent for well over 30 years. That was a mistake probably they wouldn't make again. So again, solar does not convey. You should use the solar form. COE +3, you need to use the seller in possession form, right? So, some of that language that we got used to, the short stuff, we got used to doing those kinds of things, and it really causes a problem for us. So, you need to make sure you spell things out. Don't say COE, say close of escrow, okay? All right. Okay. For any item and or system that is leased or financed, is there a contract, a lease agreement, deed of trust, and or a UCC filing? Okay, so I had a broker recently tell one of our Linda's agents that it's on the prelim. Well, we haven't even seen the prelim yet, but I assure you it's not on the prelim. It's a UCC filing. Okay, so it's a separate filing. It's a commercial filing, and so Uniform Commercial Code. But it always manages to creep up right before closing. And so in this case, I think we're going to find out that there is a filing, and it is there, but you can't just shirk your duty. The judges will ask me, they'll say, why did the agent shirk their 2079 duty of inspection? And it's like, okay, I get it. All right, what are the monthly payments? When do the payments end? Are there any monthly, if there are no monthly payments, explain what agreement currently exists. And so in our case, an agreement that they can come back, they get to maintain and they charge for the maintenance. And if you don't pay the maintenance, they can take the unit off your roof. So I think there's got to be more legislation on these things, but that's the way that it is right now. Attached copy of all the documents, including the lease statement. Okay. Paragraph SPQ 9. Now remember, we went from paragraph 8 to 9. Remember, we only covered the paragraphs that needed help, as we say. Disaster relief insurance or civil settlement rather. So this requires a deeper explanation of that. Water related, this was an example. So SPQ 10, no issues. We thought, CAR did a great job on that. Water related mold issues covered in the SPQ. Pets, animals and pests covered adequately in the SPQ. Then we get to paragraph number 12 in the SPQ, boundaries, access, and property used by others. Is the property fenced? Some of the questions you would think would be really obvious. If yes, where? Which owner built the fence? Who maintains the fence? Are you aware if fences are located within the property boundary lines, within the neighbor's property, on the line? Not sure. I think not sure is probably a good answer. Overhangs. So are you aware if your neighbor's roof trees or shrubs overhang any property line? So call that an encroachment. If yes, please explain it. Paragraph 13, landscaping, pool, and spa. Are you aware of any standing or ponding water? Number 14, common interest condominiums and developments. And again, now we're getting into condo conversion. And so as the market has changed, we're probably going to start, we were seeing a lot of conversions happening, like Archstone goes out, and when they build a building to use as an apartment complex, they put separate water meters on them, because when they go to resell them, they need to have the water meter. Each one has to have a separate water meter. And so that's usually an indication when you see something like that. You got to figure that at some point they're going to put the property on the market and essentially condominiumize it, right? So condo conversion. Are you aware of the complex was a conversion from apartments or to condos? And so the Del Mar Bluffs is an example. In Del Mar, on the southwest corner of Del Mar Heights Road and Mango, that was an apartment complex. And then back in the 70s, it was converted into condominiums and sold. Then there was a huge lawsuit against the developer that did the conversion because of the little things like it's 3 stories, and they've got a walkway around the interior of the building that accesses the front door of the units. Well, when the developer put the walkway and the handrails in, they had it curved into the unit so that anytime it rained, the water would go into the individual units rather than out into the middle of the complex. And so those are kind of one of the reasons why they ask those questions. I think I said earlier, I actually have the original lawsuit from the developer the developer's lawsuit from back in 78, I think it was. So I give copies of that to everybody who wants to buy one in there. Parking, number, location, etc. CAR now has the parking and storage amendment or addendum, so that you can tell people about that. Do you own, rent, lease your parking space? What is your space number? We had one recently where they didn't put the names of people or the unit numbers on any of the parking spots because they were worried about the bad guys coming in. They would know that you weren't there, and so because you weren't your parking spot, so they would just assume that they could go ahead and break into your property. So what they did is they just changed it to like an ABCD numbering system, so that it wouldn't be too intuitive for the bad guy to figure out, what parking spot went to what unit. What is the cost of the parking space? These are questions that are not asked in the SPQ. I think at some point they'll start copying the answers or questions over, things like that. Storage units, same kind of deal as parking. Where is it located? What is the cost of the space? Modifications to your unit. Constructed or modified a patio, balcony, fence, or other part of the home. Did the HOA approve of it? If yes, give us a copy of that approval. I sure don't blame you for asking for that. Then I get down into page number 4, other common interest condominium questions. Are you aware of any current violations or restrictions? Are you aware of any significant defects or malfunctions in any of the common area? So remember, the agent's duty to inspect the property does not extend to common areas. It's limited to the unit itself, or the property itself. And so, are you aware of any significant defects or malfunctions? This is just breaking, again, unpeeling that onion. Title ownership and legal claims. Additional questions, have you received any compensation in litigation or settlement? If yes, what related repairs were completed or not? Sometimes people will win a settlement and then not do the work that the settlement provided for them to do. I had a transaction in Carmel Valley where the seller had a $14,000 insurance check from USAA, but then did not disclose the water-related damage that had occurred at the property that resulted in a $14,000 check. And it was interesting when I asked the other agent. First of all, they said, "Are you calling the seller a liar?" And I said, "No, I'm looking at a copy of a check, and the seller said there were no claims, and here's a check last year." And so they got back to me and they said, well, they got put up in the DoubleTree Hotel for the $14,000. They were put in the hotel for 2 weeks. And I said, I don't know of a DoubleTree Hotel in this area that charges $1,000 a night for a room. And so, needless to say, that started to get really ugly, and the buyer closed the transaction and then went after the seller, and of course they were successful. So is the property leased subject to an option? Are there any options, any first right of refusals on the property? Boy, wouldn't you like to know that? Usually, an option doesn't have to be recorded. It would be intelligent to record it because you want to give notice to the world that there is one, but not all people know that, and they don't necessarily record their options. So any of the items listed in Section A, remember Section A, that was the one with all the stuff that's included, rented or leased rather than owned, and again, water softener, security system, et cetera. So again, explain it. Buyer may not be obligated or authorized to assume the seller's lease. And so, that's a deal you don't want to close, right? Seller and buyer must determine the disposition of leased items. This is nowhere are you going to find this anywhere. Neighborhood, we'll talk a little bit about the neighborhood, any current or proposed construction that'll affect views, things like that, any dumps or toxic waste, anything like that, any condition on adjacent or neighborhood properties that are unstable soils, cracked slabs, things like that, because they may also affect this one. Any obnoxious odors, any high voltage power lines. I had a case, it never went to court, where the agent photoshopped out the high power lines, the high tension lines on that were in the, that you could see clearly from the property. They photoshopped them out. I wouldn't have done that, but they did. And so that was a big check. Question. I think I answered the SPQ question. Patty, nope, I answered that one too. Guadalupe, are there issues selling a property if there was an insurance claim on it? No, but it may make the property, all properties are insurable, I think. It's just a question of how much it's going to cost. So if there was an insurance related claim on the particular property, the buyer may get a higher premium requirement than they would have otherwise, and so they need to know that. Plus, also, if the buyer's insurance payments are going to be high enough that the lender will no longer do the loan, then you're going to have a problem there, right? So the buyer could be tight on their financing, and so $1,200 a month insurance payment, the lender's going to look at that and say, yep, you can't get the loan because that's going to preclude your ability, it's going to take you beyond the qualification level. So yes, that's a very serious issue. Insurance claim that required insurance claim due to water damage, roof leaked, everything was repaired. And then your next question is a really good one. Guadalupe said, do we simply disclose? The answer is yes, always disclose. So, and especially if they repaired it. If they repaired it, make the disclosure, give them evidence of the repair. Again, they can't sue you for what you told them. And some people will say to me, well, they repaired it, I don't have to make the disclosure. That is not correct. Why wouldn't you disclose a repair? I mean, if you had it done right, why wouldn't you disclose it? I mean, I think that's really, really important to let the buyer know, not only did this go wrong, but this is what we did about it. Okay, so great question there. I've never seen this form, SPQA. Well, you should have this in every transaction you do in San Diego County. Can you tell me again if it's contractually? It is contractually required if you include it in the purchase agreement. If you don't put it in there, a lot of the seller's agents will push back because they really don't like to have to do that extra piece of work. So the seller is going to be the one best knows the answer to the questions. Again, when you send it for electronic signature, the seller can fill it out based on them being able to do it online. We have a transaction currently up north in San Diego County where the agent's from another area, and so we have not gotten back the SPQA yet. And so obviously we're going to need to provide them with a form if they're clearly not paying attention to the contract. So we have it in the purchase offer. SDAR forms, APA, LAD, and SPQA are required in the transaction. So this is going to be an eye opener for them. They haven't made the disclosures yet, so we're not going to let them out of the deal if they try to. But it is contractually required, so I can ask for it from now on. Absolutely. And again, the other agent may not know what it is, but if they don't have the form, then you may end up having to provide it to them. Anonymous, hi, welcome back. What are ways to check on insurance claims aside from seller statements? So the easiest way to do it as an agent, we really don't have access to it. We used to at the beginning, but LexisNexis bought Clue, the system, and they run it. You can only get it from the seller, but or the insurance company. So if your buyer, again, I always say have your buyer check for the availability and cost of insurance at the time of the offer. Don't wait until the buyer removes their investigation contingency, because when they do that, they've removed their right to the insurance question. So don't let them do that. Make sure that they check with their insurance company up front. Their insurance company is going to run the Clue report. They have the ability to do that. The LexisNexis seems to think that it's a privacy issue, but insurance companies run it. Because why? Because it is a common database for insurance companies. It's a comprehensive loss underwriting exchange. And so they share information about claims against property, but not just the property, but also the individual. So Guadalupe's question a minute ago, what if I find out that the buyer's got 5 claims? They may have a hard time getting insurance. I've been fortunate in my career that I had one property that had a claim, and then the insurance company paid for it. And then a year later, we had to revisit it because the person that did the people that did the work didn't do it right. And so the problem came back, and so they had to pay again. So, but remember, there's no law in California that requires property insurance, right? Driver's insurance, what do you call it? Automobile insurance is required by law, but there is no law that requires property insurance. The lender requires it. We call it hazard insurance. The lender requires it. Why? Because it's smart. It makes sense to have the property insured. I mean, I saw so many properties in Scripps Ranch back in the fires of October of 10 years ago, October of 13, that were destroyed by fire, and half the people there didn't have loans, so they didn't have insurance. That's not the way, the insurance is there for a reason, and the lender requires it because it's a good idea, right? And the courts have held that it's, easy to obtain, readily available, fairly inexpensive. If you didn't get it, you're stuck. So great question. Thank you for that. Okay, so governmental special regulations, right? Are there any special, like slope restrictions, open space setback requirements? And again, are you aware of the release of any illegal or controlled substance on or beneath the property? Other prior transaction disclosures. So this goes straight to the question that I was asked a minute ago by the flipper. So are you aware of any disclosure reports from your purchase of the property, including but not limited to the TDS? And so it's a really good question. So, are you aware of it? So now the buyer's aware that the seller has made them aware of it. They want a copy of it. Please provide a copy. So this doesn't create a contract, but we're going to ask them to give us a copy of that. If they don't give us a copy of that, I assure you probably means that there's something juicy about that property that the buyer will find out more about after closing. And again, remember the little old lady with the cookies, we don't want to have that happen. Okay. All right. So that was page 4, and we're into 5 now. I definitely want to get into my Avid here because we're going to spend a little time on that. If it's 2 or more units, answer the following questions: additional information, seller's acknowledgement. Then we got a whole page here, buyer's legal duty to exercise reasonable care, which includes an investigation of the property. Everybody good with that? That's my SPQA question. Can a buyer back out during the investigation period if they find out they cannot afford insurance? Well, again, it is a contingency. It never used to be, but it is now. Insurance is a contingency of the transaction. So the answer is perhaps, right? It has to be a material fact affecting the value and desirability of the property. So, okay. Agent's visual inspection disclosure, one of my favorite, Avid form. Remember, the TDS is incomplete till the seller's agent's Avid is given to the buyer. Paragraph number 1, or I'm sorry, page 1 talks about the disclosures indemnification. Let's take a look at that, because this is quite the eye opener. And a lot of people don't realize this. And I'm going to tell you at the bottom of the page. So here's the agent's visual inspection disclosure. Page 1, nothing for you to do. You filled out the cover sheet, you filled out a form, all of this will be populated for you. Remember that if it's more than 1 unit, we're going to check this box because you're going to do one for each of the units. Okay. Your brokerage firm's name is in here. Okay. You're going to put that in there. And then here's all my disclosures and indemnifications. Okay. California law requires this. Here's what's going to go on. California law does not require the agent to inspect the following. So here I've got my block out right here of stuff that they're not required to investigate. Agent's inspection limitations. And this is why I say, read the form. And because if you read the form, you will know not to make statements that are inconsistent with the form. The form says, I don't pull permits. And then you go down and pull permits, or you say you'll pull the permits. The form says you don't. The form says you can't. Well, I'm sorry, you can, but you may not. You just raised your broker's liability as well. We want to protect the broker as well. Okay. So roof and attic, we're not going to climb onto the roof or attic. Interior, exterior, appliance, size of the property or improvements, environmental hazards, all these things. These are all things that, we're not going to measure square footage or lot, we're not going to walk the pins for you, things like that. So then please don't do it. Okay. This is why we told you, don't put the square footage on the flyer, that kind of thing. Then I get down to this paragraph right down here, what this means to you. I was in a trial that this certainly went well for my client, I was the expert, not the attorney. And the attorney for the agent, because that's who was being sued, the brokerage, had this paragraph blown up in big letters on the PowerPoint on the screen for the jury to see. And I got a kick out of it, right? And it says right in here, it is not intended to take the place of any other type of inspection, nor is it a substitute for a full and complete disclosure by the seller. This is just the agent's visual on the property. I mean, can you see that? Yeah, you can. Okay, good. All right. So regardless of what the agent inspection reveals or what disclosures made by the sellers, California law specifies the buyer has a duty to exercise reasonable care to protect him or herself. And so they need to go do their own inspection. Buyers should review any disclosures obtained from the seller, obtain advice about and inspections of the property from other appropriate professionals, and review findings of those professionals with the persons who prepared them. If the buyer fails to do so, the buyer is acting against the advice of the broker. And we actually have a separate form in the library, acting against the advice of broker for the buyer, acting against the advice of broker for the seller. Seller says, I don't want to disclose this. And the agent says, no, you really need to be disclosing this. And now we have a form that says, I told you to disclose this and you refuse to do it. But this paragraph right here, big bold letters up on top of the screen. Okay. That's page 1. There's nothing else for you to do except read it, please. One time, would you do that for me? Just read it once. Okay. I want you to read it because you're going to be surprised at what it says. Okay. All right. And then I get down to page 2. Page 2, again, we're going to say which unit number this is, if it's a duplex, triplex, or fourplex. And I need you to fill in this information. The broker's information will automatically populate from page 1, but I want to see the inspection date and time, the weather conditions, other people that are present, and why. As Veronica said, you need to be able to defend the fact that you actually did it. So if you put down in here clear as a bell, and then the attorneys, I guarantee this, they're going to go back and look up the weather on that day, and it was pouring rain for 3 days. You're going to have a hard time saying that you filled this out at or about the time that you completed your inspection of the property. Is everybody okay with that? The undersigned, based on a reasonably competent, diligent visual inspection, you see how this is constantly restated, constantly, right? And so, it must be important. Okay, is everybody okay with that? It's very, very important. All right, and then I realized from page 2 that we're going to talk about the interior of the property. So if you get in here and you're looking at excluding the common areas and you don't notice anything, do me a favor, fill in the line, put nothing noted. Okay. If you do notice something, put it in there. But remember, and this is important, let me see, I'm going to pull back because I said something in here. Page 2 is the interior, page 3 is the exterior. Remember that your job is to disclose, not diagnose. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the form, and this is what I see that agents are doing in these things, like dining room, like minor settling crack noted in dining room. Okay, so you shouldn't have said minor, you shouldn't have said settling. Crack is good. Okay, crack noted in dining room, ceiling, floor, wall, whatever, but don't diagnose what it is. I had such a lawsuit. I had a lawsuit where the agent put in water stain noted in the northeast corner of bedroom number 2. I thought they did a great job, except they used the word water. So stain would have been all you needed to say. After closing, buyer goes up into the attic to find out where the water source of the water stain, and it turns out it's paint cans. This was a big lawsuit. It cost the brokerage a lot of money. Okay, again, all these are other people's lawsuits, not ours. We're just really thorough and good about what we do, but probably shouldn't have used the word water, because it turned out it was paint, and that involved hazmat and all kinds of other stuff. So again, remember, your job is to disclose, not diagnose. Don't opine an opinion. I see them all the time where the agent will put down suggested fixes. You just need to add a little, tape or whatever. I'm like, no. So in our office, our agents will complete one of these and they'll send it to me, and then I'll review it before it goes out to the parties, because I don't want to see those things in there that are going to be damning for us. Black, mold noted on the wall. And it's like, how do you know it's mold? Well, because there's a stain. Okay, why didn't you just say stain? Right? Again, I go to depositions all the time. You don't want to be there. It's very stressful. Why didn't you just say stain? You opined that it was mold. Why? Oh, because it smelled funny. Okay, and again, do you know the difference between mold and mildew? So this is a problem that we bury ourselves, all right? And so, you're sitting there in the deposition and the attorney is trying to slip you up, and you're going to have a problem. You don't have it unless you've got a degree that says that you know the difference between the two, but I don't even offer those things, okay? Kitchen, others. So we're going to break it down by rooms, bedrooms, bathrooms, all that. We have, notice up here, we have rooms, bedrooms. We don't call it master or primary or anything like that. We just call it a room. Okay. So that's page 2. Very little for you to do in there either. Most of the ones I see, nothing noted, nothing noted, but literally, if you see something, you got to say it. Okay. Because otherwise, if your whole page is nothing noted, I'm going to think you didn't go inside the house. Okay. All right. And then in page number 3, other, but then I get down into, now remember, page number 2 was the interior, page number 3 is the exterior. Now here's where we're going to get to what the DRE is looking at right now. So I get down here to the box that says this disclosure is based on a reasonably competent, diligent. Geez, how many times are we going to say that, right? On the property above, it says here, firm who performed the inspection, not investigation, inspection. They finally changed that for me. Okay. And then down here, the signature of the signature now of the associate licensee or the broker who performed the inspection. And so I'm in a meeting with Veronica and she says, we have agents going out and doing the inspection, and then they bring it back to the office and the team leader signs it. Well, we think that's fraud. And that's a quote. Okay. Why is it fraud? Because you signed something saying that you did it when in fact you didn't do it. I mean, listen, they look at this stuff. Okay. And so, be truthful in all things and protect yourself and protect your broker. I have a great interactions with the Department of Real Estate. I think they do, a yeoman's job, as we say, do a great job on stuff. And so, I want you to feel as good about them as I do. I think that, we're afraid of what they're going to do to us and stuff like that. But listen, to do your job, read the form, sign the form if you created it. I had Joe Kazora, who I love Joe dearly. He's one of Linda's agents, broker since before me, broker since 71. And he went with me on a listing appointment. And he completed the Avid. I was the seller's agent, seller's broker. Linda was the seller's broker. I was just the agent, but I didn't complete the Avid. Joe did. I spent 3.5 hours with the seller going over all the disclosures, but Joe did the Avid. So Joe signed the Avid. And since Joe's a broker under Linda's ticket as well, that was sufficient, right? So it's set up here that said that Joe did it, and then Joe signed it, and then that's okay. Everybody good with that? All right. And then finally, down at the bottom of this page, I've got not all defects are observable. Okay. That language is meant to protect you. The inspection does not include testing. No, please. Licensees are not home inspectors or contractors. So I'm never going to have an opinion contrary to what the physical inspector comes up with. If an inspector comes up with an opinion about something, it is not my job to critique their opinion. Right now, if I disagree with it, I may recommend the buyer have another inspection done or have another source looked at it. I have had inspectors say things that, they comment on code issues and things like that. And you have a document that they just have the buyer sign says they don't do code, so that kind of thing. So buyer should obtain advice about and inspections of the property. We always have the buyer sign off on the buyer's election of inspections, the San Diego form. It's like 8 pages long of all the possible different inspections that the buyer could do. And again, if the buyer fails to do so, they're acting against the advice of the broker. So the buyer signs down here. So now obviously the agent completed the form. Agent signs it first. Remember what I've always told you, when the signatures are stacked, they're signed in chronological order. When they're side by side, it doesn't matter who signs first. So remember my TDS, it doesn't matter at the bottom who the seller or the buyer signs, after the rest of it's complete, because their signatures are next to each other. But in this case, I know that the agent has to sign it first, and then the buyer will sign it. And then the seller can initial it, but they're not required. It's just used as evidence that that this party has received the form, whether it's the seller or the buyer. I don't know why we put seller in there. It should be the seller or the buyer, because it depends on who actually completed the form. And then the seller's agent signs it, and then the buyer's agent signs it. All right, everybody good with that? And so should be signed in that order. I get them back all the time where, I've signed it and then I was the seller's agent. So the buyer should, I send it over to the buyer's agent, and the buyer's agent has the buyer sign it, and then the buyer's agent signs it as well. Well, I need to sign up here before you sign down here, right? So, but it's just a common mistake. So, are there any questions about any of that? That's my Avid. Remember, disclose, don't diagnose. And so statutory disclosure is one that's required by law. And I just wrote this out for you. It contains rescission rights, right? A failure to make a statutory disclosure gives the offended party the right to reset the contract. In other words, put the parties back in the position that they were in prior to contract, okay? Same thing holds true for a defective statutory disclosure, so a defective TDS. Huge repercussions in a real estate transaction. Contractual disclosures, on the contrary, are one that are required by the contract, and again, determined by what the contract says. So the SPQ, clearly, if you're using the RPA, it requires the contract. It requires the SPQ. I add the SPQA in the paragraph number 4, addendum advisories, to make sure that they include that as well. So again, the contractual disclosures contain cancellation rights, maybe an opportunity for the party to exit without penalty, maybe. But again, remember, the statutory disclosures give rescission rights, very powerful term of law. The contractual contract disclosures contain contractual cancellation rights. Now, that's something we can usually fight about, right? But statutory disclosures, you blew it. Okay, so I think I'm running short on time here. Oh, got a couple minutes. Are there any questions about any of this? Anybody have any questions? TDS, SPQ, SPQA, Avid? No. Okay. Well, I left that in there. I actually have created a QR code that I don't have here yet, but a short link to all my videos. So if you want, if you want to go look at any of my previous videos, send me an email. I would be happy to send you the link to that. Eventually, I'll figure out how to get this on the PowerPoint. But I've been uploading all my videos online so that you'll have access to it currently for free. I'm sure at some point I'll probably start charging like $5 or something just so that I can restrict access to it. But for now, they're all free. So send me an email and let SDAR know. If you see anything, like I had an agent the other day send an email to SDAR and said, can you have Kevin do a class on agency? I'm actually really excited about it because, agency is obviously my expertise, but it is not what people think it is. And so it would be a pretty good class, I think. So I'm going to be talking to SDR about doing that. But if you have something like that you want to see done, please send them a message. You can always copy me on it. Weekly email updates. I do have a newsletter. It gives you direct links to my classes. So you just click on the button and it takes you straight to the class. You bypass the thing that says that the classes are sold out. I want you in the class. So if you want to get the newsletter, it's opt-in. So if you don't want it, don't send me anything. Send me other stuff. But unless you ask specifically to be included, I'm not going to include you in it. My email address now has a hyperlink to it, so you can add yourself to it. And then it'll have obviously a QR code in the coming future here. So if there aren't any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and get ready to get out of here. Anybody have anything for the good of the order? I'm looking at my calendar here. Clock says, okay. 4 minutes. All right. I'm letting you go 4 minutes early. I want to thank you all for being here today. Lena, make sure you put your questions. I'll touch base with you, Lena. I'm sorry about that. I'm going to call my guy here in a second, find out what's going on. But I want to thank you all for being here today. Great discussion and great questions. Thank you. And as we say from my hometown of Del Mar, I look forward to seeing you around the track. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye for now.